Okay. On the road again. Oh, whoa, there we go. Come on, audio. There we go. Oops. Welcome to my studio. My name's Michael Markowsky. Today we're going to be looking at another artist that is one of my favorite artists of all time. As we've been doing over the course of the past year, looking at hundreds of different artists from all over the world. Today we're going to continue our trip to India and looking at the work of Haider Raza, or S.H. Raza, as some people might refer to him, or Raza. Haider Raza is, I think, one of the most interesting artists from India, one of the most radical artists from India, and we're going to make the painting you see here on the screen over the next couple of hours. So hope you join me and paint along. If you're watching this video for, after it was recorded live, right? Because I do this live and you see all the mistakes and corrections and me trying to figure out how to make this painting in real time. But if you're watching it live, go right to the very end. Take a look at how the painting turned out and you decide for yourself if you want to paint or you want to watch or listen to what I have to say. So let's jump right into to looking at the artist and to making this painting. I'll let you know that there is an outline which you can print out. It's free. I did a outline using my iPad Pro and the Procreate app, and I traced out the image, and I've uploaded it into a Dropbox folder. You'll see a link in the description below to a Dropbox folder, and you'll see all of these images in here that we've already painted by artists from all over the world, male and female, and perhaps a couple of trans, non-binary people in there as well. I'm not quite sure. Who would be, like, if we go all the, let's just, before we jump into this, let's go to number 78 here. Haider Raza. Okay, and you'll see 3 files here. There's 2 versions of the outline. One's a JPEG, one's a PDF, and then, of course, the original image itself. Although I should say, before I go too much further, that this is what the actual original painting looks like. It's a square format, and it was 39 by 39 inches, which is a pretty big painting, right? Many of his paintings are pretty big, so which is basically a meter by a meter, right? So if those of us in the metric world, it's basically kind of like arm's length, right? So this is it's a large painting, a large square painting, and then I've adapted it to this a little bit longer, more rectangular or taller rectangular format, just for the purposes of our class. Basically the reason is I've been doing every single painting on a 9 by 12 sized canvas, and I'm a big fan of Raza's work, so I thought, well, let's see if we can adapt this painting, which I really, really like, to this surface. So I know some people will find that sacrilege, but I'll point it out anyway. Before we go any further, I also want to let you know that there's a private Facebook group just for people like yourself who are watching, painting along with me. I encourage you to join the group here and upload your version of today's painting to the Facebook group. This weekend, I'm not even exactly sure. Might be Saturday evening. I don't know. I'll have to take a look at the calendar. My in-laws are visiting, flying into Vancouver from Toronto. Probably right now they're landing, so it's going to be a busy weekend. I have to take a look. But that's a great reason to like and subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so that you will know whenever you're on YouTube when I go live. You can go like, oh, look, and then my notifications on the top of the app or in the browser. Oh, okay, Michael's going live in a few minutes. Great. Okay, cool. I'll join up and watch. Well, I've already done the outline. I'm going to show how that works in a second. Let's just take a quick moment to look at his biography. S.H. Raza, again, however you want to refer to him. I think most popularly known as S.H. Raza, or just Raza. I'm not sure, how will I refer to him today? I might go say Haider Raza, or just Raza, I'm not sure. Let's see. So he passed away relatively recently, so lived a long life to the age of 94. And he was painting pretty much right up until the last few years of his life. Born in India, died in India, although he spent the majority of his life living in Paris. And we'll get to that here in a moment. What can I say? So, my understanding is that he was born into a Muslim family, and which is, you know, there's a large portion of India that is Muslim, and which is not surprising considering, well, especially because when he was born, India actually also encompassed Pakistan as well, and that figures prominently into his biography, is the partition of India and Pakistan into two separate countries. And most of his friends, when growing up, and family, brothers and brothers, moved to Pakistan after the partition, rather than staying in India. So let me see. So yeah, his father was a deputy forest ranger. He began taking classes, you know, at age 12. He studies at the Sir J.J. School of Art in Bombay, and then receives a painting scholarship to l'École des Beaux-Arts in Paris in 1950. So that would be roughly age 29 or so is when he moves to Paris, and he becomes the first non-French artist to receive the Prix de la Critique, which is like I didn't look into this as closely as maybe I should have, but the Prix de Critique is an award given to mostly comic book artists, at least traditionally, and especially when it was first created. And so I'm not exactly sure why he would have received that award, because originally that award was given to, especially to people like Belgian, French comic book artists, like Hergé, the artist who did Tintin, etc., right? We'll talk about this a number of times throughout today's episode. He is one of the founders and the central figures to what is known as Bombay's Progressive Artist Group here. And the Progressive Artist Group was a radical, revolutionary group, art movement in India that was started by 6 other artists, and one of which we're going to look at on Saturday, which is why I can't remember where I'm going to fit in our feedback session anyway. But the goal, the reason why they formed this group is, you have to understand, is back, you know, India was a British colony, right? It had been colonized, and a fairly repressive British colonial government that extended through all facets of Indian life, including art. So if you went to art school in India, you know, as Raza did, you would learn how to paint in the English, the British style, European realistic style of painting. And you know, for Indian artists, especially when India received its independence from England after World War II, and there's the partition, like it's quite a traumatic moment in the history of the country, for many good reasons, and also there was, lots of bloodshed around that time as well. But you have artists like Raza who are like, if we're going to be our own country, we can't just be painting what the British painted, and we can't paint India in the way that the British painted India. We have to paint India the way Indians see India. And that there's a number of other artists, again 5 other artists, who come together with this like-minded spirit, who decide, let's how can we reimagine what the art of India would look like, right? And of course Raza chooses one way of going about things, and then some of the other artists also pursue other, maybe a little bit more representational. Raza himself goes pretty much full abstraction, non-representational art, which we're going to check out in a second. Let me see. We'll talk about the Bindu here as we go. He receives, he moves back to India in 2010 and then dies, I think, in 2016. So he receives the Legion of Honor from the French government shortly, I think the year before he dies, which is a huge achievement for an Indian artist, and is another reason why he's so celebrated, because he's one of the main Indian artists to break through internationally. He's one of the first Indian artists who's at school at the L'École des Beaux-Arts, which would have been probably a bit, I imagine, a bit of a difficult situation for a young Indian artist, being, one of the only persons of color in that school. Although he wasn't the only one. There were, we talked about some of the Chinese and Japanese artists who were also there. But, it would have been a bit of a culture shock, to say the least. Okay, so let's just take a quick look. Here's him. This is probably, the 1970s, I think he's... So some of the work that he's making originally is these more expressionist landscape type of paintings. And it's not until the late 60s that he kind of moves more into his the style that he becomes really famous for, most known for, which is this geometric abstraction. This, by the way, here, I'm not even sure how to pronounce, but this is one of his most famous paintings. It's sold for about $3.5 million at auction about 4 or 5 years ago. Saurashtra, does that sound right? And this is a large painting. If we did a Google search on it, you'd see it takes at least 2 people to hold this large painting up. I would say this is probably like a 8-foot tall, 7-foot tall painting. So again, most of his paintings are quite large. Okay, so let's jump into the painting. Let's start making this awesome artwork. I'm also just I'll get into. I have so many things I want to say here, but let me. Okay, so you can print out the outline from the Dropbox folder, and once you've got that printed out, you can print it out onto regular photocopy paper, onto I typically use a little bit of a thicker cardstock. That's just my personal preference, but it actually makes your life a little bit easier if the paper is a little bit thinner. So I'm just going to play this video, and I'll talk over top of it while it's playing here. So I'm going to make this artwork on a 9x12 sized canvas, right? And that's what I've been using for every one of these 141 paintings that we've made over the past year. I did try my best to try to get that relatively straight, right? I mean, we'll talk about, he's not particularly obsessed with perfection in his work, so I don't think it needs to be absolutely perfectly straight or centered, but obviously, if it's kind of crooked, it would just drive me a little bit crazy. So you can see I'm also going to use a ruler for a little bit of these outer lines. And I'm also going to extend the lines up and down here. So let's just kind of play this through. I do all the lines in the center. And then I turn, I don't know if you just see, I'll just show you that. I turn, to get to the other side there, I'm just going to flip this around. Just because it makes my life a little bit easier. And that pencil is on its last leg there. There's barely any pencil left on there. That's like a... Okay. So once I've got that, you can see I peeled it off and there's still the lines on the bottom left to do. So, oh, I did show that pretty quickly, so let's just kind of go back. All right, you see it, I'm kind of eyeballing this. In the past I've shown how I would do this. I would just measure the previous lines that are there. And then you can see I just sort of join them up here. And unlike the Tolerator painting that we did a couple of days ago, we did the two palm trees, if you recall. That painting, I used some tape in order to get really nice, clean edges and really super precise. I'm not going to do that with Raza's painting today because he has a very different approach to painting geometric abstraction. And it's really interesting because traditionally, although, actually this could be up for debate, but let's just say in general, traditionally artists, when they're doing geometric abstraction, are going for as precise and clean of lines as possible. And so, you know, if you think of, I don't know, artists like Frank Stella or who was another, like we looked at Al Loving, who was the first artist we did as part of this Master Study series. You know, the lines are perfect. They're nice and sharp, and that's often because those artists used tape in order to get sharp edges. Now, we're not going to do that today because, as you can see, if we zoom in on this painting, Raza is not concerned with having perfect sharp lines. In fact, it's not even as if he's going over these lines, trying to, even without a ruler, and trying to get them to match up exactly. He's almost going out of his way to leave imperfections in the work, which I think is absolutely fascinating, and one of the major reasons why I wanted to focus on his work for one of these Master Studies episodes is it's a good reminder that just because you're painting abstract paintings, especially geometric abstract paintings, doesn't mean it has to be perfect, right? That you can allow for some messiness to happen, right? Just like Raza. Like, look at this. Obviously he made, I think this painting is, again, somewhere in the mid 80s. I wasn't able to find the date. That's why it's no date. But, you know, obviously he could paint this in, but he chose not to. Right? And that, for me, when I think of that, reminds me a lot more of an artist like Henri Matisse, who was really into allowing the quote-unquote unfinished areas of the canvas to shine through. Okay, so let's get right into the painting. So, speaking of which, how do we want to approach this painting? Because typically the first thing that I do is apply a little bit of warm yellow onto the canvas. And I put that all over the entire surface of the canvas. If we go back in just to exactly where I just was up here, we see there's actually, it's actually really fascinating. I don't think this is Maybe that's the pure white of the canvas. I'm not sure, but look how we can see little bits of other colors in here. Almost as if he's painted some of the... Like, this is definitely an area where he painted a yellow underneath and then changed it and made it darker. Right, and we have some yellows under here. So, that makes things very interesting. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to modify what I normally do just to make things, to get a little bit of an off-white color onto the canvas to begin with. So I'm going to take some of my, actually maybe not quite as much today. Let's take some of this warm yellow. I'll take a bit more and we'll see how much we end up using. Basically what I'm going to go for is a kind of a brown. That's what I'm looking for. So all of my paints can fit inside of a shoebox, and that's really important to me, that because I know I'm lucky. I've got a studio where I can walk away for a month at a time, go on vacation, and everything is going to stay in the exact same position as that I left it in. I hope. That would be alarming if it didn't, but I know most people watching, especially beginner artists, might have very limited space to work in and need to clean up and at the end of a painting session and put everything away. And sometimes you see professional artists, people demonstrating how to paint, and they have so much stuff, you're like, well, that would take me 20-30 minutes just to set, or even longer just to set up, and then 20-30 minutes to take down. That's an hour of setting and cleaning up. Like, I might only have 20 minutes a day to paint, right? That's so that maybe this is not a hobby for me. And so I think it's really important that everything can be packed up in a relatively quick manner. Now I'm just going to put some of these colors onto my main palette here. And then I'm going to paint in this background. I want to mix a bit of a brown. That's why I'm just getting some of my warm red and my, sorry, this is red, my warm red and my warm blue here. I'm going to add them to this color right here. So, and let's get a bit of water mixed in here. Again, this is the only time I ever use water when I'm painting. There's a bit of extra water. Let's just shake it out. So let's just mix this up here. We'll get a kind of a brown right here. Maybe that's good enough. I don't know. I kind of like this. What color would you say this is? Bit of like I don't know what color that is. Kind of has like it reminds me of the kind of hollandaise sauce my mom makes when she makes eggs Benedict. That's what this reminds me of. I know you're expecting me to say something, some really high-minded, precise thing about color, and I'm talking about hollandaise sauce, but so I'm just taking a little bit of that red and a little bit of this blue and adding those in here. And that's just going to turn this color, which I did really like. It's going to make it a little bit more of a sandy brown color. And you can see I'd used barely any of it, right? Sometimes people go wild with this stuff. Let me see, that looks... a little bit too bright. Maybe that helps. Okay, and I'm just mixing it up in here. And now let's apply this onto this canvas. You have to be a little bit careful if you're going to add white to a base layer like this. Remember, white is great for covering up mistakes, and you know, it's a great foundational layer. So if you have just solid white in there, you might lose all of your pencil lines. So again, I usually just paint warm yellow over top of the painting for what we call the imprimatura layer, the first layer. It's Italian because that's where this technique comes from, right? It's a kind of a Renaissance era technique that Leonardo would have used, Michelangelo would have used, Raphael would have used. Not Donatello, the fourth member of the Ninja Turtles, because Donatello was a sculptor. And Donatello, just as an offside, as an aside, was preceded all of those artists by, you know. So anyway, I do think my interest in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles helped me get into art in a funny way. That's something I got to think about a little bit, because I'm sure it played a role in my interest in art. Okay, so there's our color. Again, it's not too dissimilar from, like, this is the warm yellow as I normally apply it on a canvas. So I really could have done that and it wouldn't have made too much of a difference. And that's, honestly, this is why I tend to just default to the warm yellow, is because the difference is very minor. But I do feel like in this case with this artist that having something a little bit closer, because we're going to be seeing this layer throughout, we're going to let it shine through many places. It won't hurt to have it there. Okay, I was wondering, I didn't see anything in the chat, and I was like, usually there's like dozens of comments by this time, so I just refreshed the browser, and it's like, holy smokes, there's a lot. There's a lot of comments in here, so, okay. I'll get to all these comments here in a second. See, that's why often there's times where I have started and people haven't commented, and I think, oh, something's wrong. Today, I was like, oh, that's weird, and I refreshed, and there was dozens of comments here waiting for me to look at. So I'll get to those in a second. I'm going to blow dry this to get it started, and then we're going to get into the painting. Actually, maybe even before that, I'm just going to put the rest of the paint on my palette here. Now, I used to have a sign saying warm yellow, and it was there, and then I went on vacation this past weekend to Pender Island, which is a small, actually a fairly large island, I guess you could say, off the coast of Vancouver. And when I came back, I couldn't find that label, which is, that is weird. It's like someone's playing some little pixie or fairy is, you know, hidden it and is playing a joke on me. I'm not sure. So, and I'm just going to use some of this cool yellow right out of the tube, since this guy's pretty much empty. Okay. And a little bit, not too much white, but we'll put a little bit of white in here. And certainly, I was going to say maybe we don't need black. Yeah, I don't think we need black in this painting. It does look very dark, but I don't think that's black. Maybe this is black down here, but it looks to me like a lot of this is a really, really dark color that we can mix ourselves. Maybe that's black up there. It wouldn't surprise me if he used a little bit of black, but mixed other colors into it so that he didn't have pure black, because pure black, especially with all of these colors, would almost like, I always think of like when you add black onto it, it's almost like prison bars on a painting. It just like it sits right on top of it and it locks all the other colors in behind it. So you have to be really careful with using black in your paintings. Okay, so got my paint on the palette. Even got this, and I just, yeah, I was like, there's a little, I got my finger on the edge, but you know what, let's blow dry this. I'm going to mute my microphone momentarily here. Okay, I see lots of comments in the chat here. Deborah's talking about going camping at Round Lake where Tom Thompson painted. It was very cold. It doesn't surprise me. And John says, this painting is fascinating. It reminds me of a time lapse of a setting sun, especially since the imperfections look like a haze on the horizon. That is cool. Yeah, definitely. It does kind of have that, you know, we're seeing the different stages of the sun setting. And almost like this is, if this is the horizon, this is the sun as it's like on the other side of the earth that we can't see, and therefore it's like this negative shape or negative color. I have this app on my phone and my iPad that you can hold it up and look at the stars, and it'll tell you what stars you're pointing and looking at, and what satellites are passing by, what planets there, and galaxies. But what's really funny is you can point it down like towards your feet, and it will tell you what's on the other side of the planet, what someone on the other side of the planet would see if they looked up at the stars. It's kind of wild. So this sort of just reminds me of holding that iPad up and just sort of looking down past underneath the horizon. Very interesting. I like that your assessment or how you see this painting, John. Okay, so great. I love it when everyone is having a whole conversation there in the chat. It makes me excited. I love that people are building these communities. Okay. So the other thing too, I'll just mention, I've got a little bit of this paint left over from painting my foundational imprimatura layer here, and sometimes it's nice just to have that sitting throughout the painting session, because especially a painting where we're going to leave some areas quote unquote unfinished. If something were to go potentially wrong, I could just paint white right over top of it. I might need 1 or 2 coats of a little bit of white. Then I could paint a little bit of the color I mixed there, and it would, whatever problem would just disappear, right? So it's nice to have something. That's another reason why I really like just using the warm yellow, because if that's to happen, I can just put some white and then warm yellow over top of it, and boom, it's like we're starting from scratch all over again, right? Okay. So, a painting like this, it really doesn't matter where we begin, right? Because unlike almost every painting we've done, I don't really anticipate overlapping paints or paint strokes at all. Pretty much everything is its own isolated shape, right? I mean, and because we have often a little bit of space between each color. So, I mean, I guess if I, if I was going to paint this, and it's like, well, I am going to paint this, so there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's happening. So, I guess what makes the most sense in terms of progression here? Well, we can just sort of talk a little bit about the colors and what colors we want to use. I mean, almost every color in here is a warm color, just to kind of start out that with. I mean, these yellows are pretty warm. Maybe this is got a bit of cool yellow in here, maybe a bit of warm and cool yellow. That might be a place where we would have cool yellow. This might be an area where we have cool and warm yellow in here together. This is definitely a warmer orangey yellow. This is a warm red. This is a warm red, although it does look like there's a bit of cool red mixed in here as well. A bit of magenta, almost a bit of a brownish color, like a bit, maybe even a bit of warm red and a bit of warm blue even in there, like that's a warm blue. This is a warm blue, maybe with a little, some of these blues I could see this, that looks a little bit cold blue. This looks more like a bit of a cerulean, which is what our cool blue is. So in this painting we don't really have a foreground and a background. I mean, you could say that this main circle here is a foreground image, and then these flat areas of color in behind are in the background, as I just said, in behind. But there is that is also just a convention, a way of looking at paintings and the world in that particular way. There isn't any necessarily reason why these shapes aren't in front of the circle, and that like maybe it's a tunnel that we're looking into, and this, so like you could imagine if your feet were standing here and then you're looking down into a circle or into like a tunnel, and this is what you see. And okay, so I mean your guess is as good as mine as to how and where we want to begin. The one thing I'm going to say is, even though there are these big areas of color, I'm probably going to paint most of this painting with a smaller brush, because Raza, he is not interested in hiding his brushstrokes. He is not interested in this perfectly smooth surface. He likes the handmade quality. He likes the imperfections that will arise throughout this process. So I'm going to use a smaller brush even to do these larger areas, because that's going to increase the likelihood that we will see brushstrokes, right? And again, that's very atypical, right? That's not many artists go that direction. Most artists are more interested in hiding their brush strokes, making things look exceptionally smooth and quote-unquote perfect. And one of the things about Raza is his embrace of the handmade, the imperfection, and using a smaller brush is going to accelerate that, right? Because if you're trying to do a large area and you use a small brush, well, you're going to see lots of little tiny marks. Okay, so how about let's just start out with... Let's kind of just go easy in here and start with our warm yellow. And I'm going to put it right in here. And one of the decisions we can make as we start doing this, and let's just kind of just zoom in. Is, you know, we have this dark line. Now, where do you want to put that line? Do you want to put the line in between these shapes? Or do we want to paint right up to the line and then leave the gap on the other side of that line? Right? This is sort of like the eternal question for abstract painters. I think in this instance, right here, I'm going to go right up to the line. And I'm going to try to avoid being, and then, so then we have, again, now we have an instance where we have this line in between. Maybe I'm going to paint a little bit over top of it. So one way that we can really make sure that we're not being too perfect is by going maybe a little bit faster than might feel comfortable. Right? Because we could, if we took our time, we could do a version of this painting which would be perfect, that could look like it was painted in a factory by a machine on the most expensive printer on earth. But I would challenge you, as you're making this painting, to not worry about perfection. Okay, so let's zoom back out and then think about, okay, let's go to the circle right in the middle, and that's my second circle here. I think I might go back over top of this later and add a bit more of an orangey quality to it. But let's just paint it in right now and see how it holds up. And then let's get this color around the top right corner. So I think the challenge for anyone who's painting along with me is, where are you going to paint your color? What are you going to allow? Like, are you going to paint right up to this line? I'm going to leave that like that, a little gap. And I'll tell you right off the top, it can be more difficult for people to leave a space like that and not paint edge to edge up to another color than it is to actually paint edge to do this, right? I think sometimes people think, well, that makes things really, really easy, because if I don't have to do all those little details, if I don't have to be so precise, that's easier. I think some of you are going to find it takes an enormous amount of restraint to allow yourself not to go right up to the lines, right? So let's back this back out. Just take a look. Okay, so that's good. I'd also just painted a little tiny dab down there. I do think what I want to do is add just a bit of red. And then I'm going to go in here. That, so it's a little bit darker, and even I see that up top here it kind of starts a little bit more orangey, and as it comes around the corner it lightens up a little bit. So I'm going to leave that like that, and then I'm going to wipe off my brush. I'm just going to come back to this color where I've got some warm yellow, maybe just a little bit of that orange. I'm telling you, it's not easy to have that restraint here. Right, to like, again, for some people they'll find this like really liberating, because they're just like, wow, look, I don't have to paint, I can, I don't have to be so precise. Wow, what a relief. And there's gonna be some other people who are just like, oh my, this is just like, it's really, really weird having to kind of, it's a different kind of restraint, right? And that's one of the things why it doesn't surprise me he did this is because the previous work that we looked at very briefly at the beginning was his more expressionist work, right? And expressionism is like, who are people associated with expressionism, like Otto Dix, and let's take a quick moment just to kind of, because I think when I use these terms, especially in a class, it's kind of helpful to be able to actually look at this, right? So expressionism, like Edvard Munch, right? The Scream is a much better example than Otto Dix. The idea of expressionism is it's like this raw, expressions using color primarily to express emotions, and distorting the perspective, so things don't look realistic. They're about trying to express something deep inside, like emotions through color. Mac, Franz Marc. Kirchner, yes, Ludwig Kirchner. Interesting. Anyway, so that's the kind of work. Again, if we go back to here, we look at his earlier paintings, the pretty wild, very loose, expressionistic types of brushstrokes. So it's interesting that even though he goes into this more geometric abstraction, he still brings that kind of expressionist way of painting geometric abstraction, which is really interesting. Like I can't really think of that many artists that transitioned from expressionism to geometric abstraction, because most people would think of them as diametrically opposed. Like, whereas he is, another reason which makes him so interesting is he was able to integrate these, they couldn't be more different into his art, right? The more I think of it, is more it's like that's really, really interesting. This is just stuff that I'm thinking off the top of my head. Maybe there's people who have written about this, and I'm talking about the obvious, but nothing that I read when I was doing my research pointed that out. Anyway, so let's go into the reds now. I'm just going to sort of kind of work my way down the painting, and maybe I'll save like this area, or let's save the white. I just got white right here. Why would I save the white until the end? That doesn't make any sense, Michael. Let's just put it in here right now. One of the techniques that I use, by the way, is sometimes I just sort of like will kind of push paint out like that. Like, it's I'm trying to think of, it's almost like I'm scrubbing a little bit with the paintbrush. Got this little bit of white there, and I think that's all the white in the painting, right? Yeah. Okay. So the next step up is, I think this is just basically a warm red. So this is going to be a warm red right out of the tube, maybe here and here. But we might modify them. So I think what I'll do is I'll just start by painting these warm reds right out of the tube. Interesting. John suggested go for the white first. It might take a few layers so the base doesn't come through. That's true. Again, just as I don't think that Raza would be too concerned of other colors coming through. Like, you can see, if we go back to this image here, like, you could see that he obviously knows how he could paint this into much more solid colors, but he doesn't care. He's very happy having the color looking like this. And like, if we look into these areas, like, look at this. I mean, it almost looks like water. Right? We can see his hand making all of these marks. So you know, why I love doing what we're doing right now is it really challenges me to to kind of have a conversation with my assumptions of how I do things and the way that I normally. It's just like traveling around the world as you see how different cultures operate, how they do the same things we do, how they organize their public transit, or how their postal system works, or banks, or sporting events. I just find it so interesting that you studying from an artist like Raza. I find it's very, like, what would be the way of describing it? There's a kind of almost a relief of being like, oh, there's all, like, it's like, okay, we kind of have blinders on and we go through the world, or at least I do as like an artist, like, this is the way I want things to turn out, and I've got to follow this path. And then, as we explore different things, you like go in different, you're like, whoa, oh, I still want to get there, but I don't have to just go right there to get there. I could go the scenic route all the way around there, or I could go this way, or I could go up and over, or I could go under here, right? Like, and it's just like, wow, okay, that's actually a bit of a relief, because it's a relief in that, wow, there's so many different ways of doing it. Maybe the way that I'm doing it is also right? So that's, that there's no correct way of doing things, because sometimes we start to think that there's one way to do it, and if you don't do it this way, then you're a complete failure, and you're just, you're an idiot, and like, what are you even doing? To find something else to do with your time, right? And so I find it like, it's like, oh, okay, wow, okay, there is lots of other options. There's options I've never even considered before. So, let's, I think, I get off on these tangents. Okay, let's make sure that's in focus. Let's, where should we go to next? As I said, this warm red. So taking the warm red right out of the tube here. And I think, I'll start by painting in this area here. We always hear the term, like, my kid could do that, and that's always used as a way of dismissing artists and ridiculing them. But, in every single instance where I hear people saying that, I think, like, wow, really? Your kid could do this? Then you better get your kid working, because it sounds like you got a golden goose there. I'd love to see your kid make a painting like this. Certainly my kid couldn't do something like this. I think our daughter, she's only 2 years old, but she'd probably just be more interested in chewing on the paintbrushes and eating the paint. Like, I'm kind of actually adding a little bit of how would you describe it? Like, irregularities into my lines as I'm painting this in order to get closer to his original image, which is kind of fun. Like, it's like, oh, I have to make some quote-unquote mistakes in order to make this painting, that if I do it quote-unquote correctly, I'll end up doing it wrong. So I have to kind of give a little bit of vibration in my hand here in order to get a little bit more of an uneven line. It's for me, this past year of making all of these paintings by all these different artists that I've loved for decades, but just I've seen them in magazines and been like, ah, that's a really cool painting, and not really thought too much more of it. But then, putting myself in their shoes and trying to make their paintings, it's sorry, I'm just going to add a little bit of cool red into this here. Not much. I don't really want it to be super noticeable, but I want it to we're going to get a little bit of a slightly different red here. I don't know if any of this comes across on camera. Maybe I'll just zoom in here. Yeah, I don't think it's too visible on camera, but it is just slightly different. And when we're talking about a painting that is all color and shapes, right, these little differences make a big deal. Like I'm telling you, if you're painting with me today and you make this painting, I think you will look at abstract paintings differently the next time you go to a museum and you start looking at paintings. Because I know there's some people who are like, yeah, I'm not really into this kind of art today, I'm going to skip today's episode. Yeah, it's fine. People are busy and they use your time however you want, right? But I do think that it can be revelatory to have that experience of walking in someone else's footsteps, especially someone who does something very, very different than what you do or what you like to do. It's like, whoa, okay, now I have this huge appreciation for the kind of art they make. And then maybe I'm more interested in actually now trying to make that kind of art. Now that I see it, now that I've experienced it. Okay. So let's continue here. I'm going to zoom back out a bit. And I guess, you know what, I'm going to take some of my red. Actually, maybe I'll take my small brush. And this is, again, kind of tricky. I'm going to do this red that's here. So let's zoom back in. Man, this is fun. I mean, I knew that today was going to be an interesting episode because it's very different than anything we've done. But I'm telling you, like, painting, it reminds me, I used to paint, as I'm doing this, I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of used to do paintings a little bit like this. I used to really like leaving gaps between colors when I was painting. Like, exactly like I'm doing here. But, you know, over the years, my painting style kind of evolved and changed, and not really consciously or deliberately, but it just sort of changes over time, and it does, it makes, it's, for me, a little bit of like a deja vu moments of like, oh, I remember working on a painting 15 years ago that kind of had a similar, you know, didn't look anything like this, but used this similar sort of approach. And, you know, I imagine that it's possible that after I finish this painting, or maybe people tuning in right now, because often when I'm doing these live streams, people just sort of pop in and out. People be like, wow, that's pretty sloppy. Like, aren't you able to get up right to those lines? Like, what's... And so, if you made a painting like this on your own, you might... There might be a certain level of self-consciousness of like, oh, I don't know if I can leave it like that. People are just gonna think I'm not very good at painting, and I don't want people to think that way about me. And so, again, think about like an artist like Raza who knows that kind of a criticism he's going to receive comments like that on his work, like, wow, like, you're pretty lazy, how come you didn't do a very good job? And he'd be like, oh no, I did that deliberately. And they're like, yeah, sure, buddy, yeah, yeah, oh yeah, so it's deliberately really sloppy, And then it's like, yeah, well, okay, well, why don't you try doing it yourself, and then you tell me if how sloppy, quote unquote, it actually is. Okay, let's take a look. Oops. Okay, so these lines here, I'm gonna get more magenta. I'm also gonna put maybe a little bit of warm blue in there. Let's just zoom out just so I can show you how I'm gonna do this. So the reason, like, I could, if I wanted, I could modify this and we could go purple, right? But if I took more, if I progressively got more and more magenta, and I had a magenta here and added some warm blue into this, we would get a really beautiful purple here, which I think would actually look really nice, but obviously it would be very different than his paintings. So rather than that, rather than go purple, I want something that's a little bit... It takes some of the intensity out of this red. So I'm going to take some of this warm blue. That's way too much of it. And mix that in here. And we can even take a bit of this magenta. Mix that in. Because these colors aren't adjacent to one another, the warm blue and the warm blue and the warm red, they're kind of crossing close to the neutral core where things start to go gray, right? So here now I've got another red, but it's just like a little bit more of this muddier kind of effect. That's perfect. That's what I want. Maybe a little bit on the darker side. But and I'm gonna go even darker one more step, so maybe I could have been a little bit, I was maybe a little bit heavy-handed, but hey, what's, you know, ultimately, what difference does it make? Who really cares? Alright, I'm using... Yikes! Yoink! Oh, okay, so if that happens, you drop your paintbrush into the middle of a... I usually do that right at the end of the painting session. Just get a little bit of water on a rag, and you can kind of just wipe it off. Obviously, you want to make sure that that's dry enough that you're not going to wipe away any paint, but... Okay, and then let's go even one more level down here. Let's add a little bit more blue into this mixture. Again, if I was to add this warm blue to this cool red, I would get a beautiful purple, but I don't want a beautiful purple. I just want a kind of a darker red, more of a crimsony, it's almost like the kind of like a scab red, right? Dried blood kind of red wine kind of thing. Ooh, that's gorgeous. I know there's lots of comments there in the chat, and my apologies, I haven't been kind of a little bit slow on it today, as I'm just sort of totally absorbed in the painting. See, so like ordinarily, you know, you see me in other paintings, if I got all of these paint strokes like this, and I saw all of them, it would drive me absolutely bonkers. And I'd probably wait for it to dry, and then come back in and paint over it again and get rid of them. Not today, right? So the question I have in my mind, okay, if I'm not going to go in and quote-unquote fix this, because I want to keep these brush strokes, then what brush strokes do I want there to be, right? Do I want, like you saw me, let's just kind of adjust this, like I could do vertical or diagonal. Like what is it that people are going to see in this area? Right, and again, there is a big part of me that thinks like, well, if I wasn't being filmed right now, I probably would just let it dry, and I'd go back in, and I would make it absolutely perfect. But that would make it a very different painting, right? So there's like this restraint of like, oh, okay, so if I'm not going to do that, then what can I do that I'm going to be able to live with? Okay. Now we got another red line. Oops. Coming down here. We got all this. So I think in these areas, I'm still going to use a red, but won't be quite as maybe dark. So let's just take the paint that's already on my brush, and I'll just kind of mix it into here. So it'll be similar but different, a little bit darker. You know, this, I don't know, again, for me, this is like a really welcome kind of painting to work on. It makes me think about maybe if I was, you know, because I'm going to reboot my Intro to Painting course in January, I think maybe I should do another Raza painting earlier on. This might be a good thing for people to experience right at the beginning of their painting journey, of realizing that you don't have to be perfect in order to be an artist. Right? The enemy of art is perfection. So many people have given up on the idea of making art because they feel that they can't do it perfectly. Which is so terribly sad. I just think about all the generations of artists that our world never got a chance to appreciate, because people were so had bought into the myth that like great art is perfect. And even if people have no expectation of becoming a famous artist, people still like, ah, well, it's not perfect, so I just... Whereas no one says to themselves, well, what's the point of getting a bicycle if I can't win the Tour de France? Like, there's no... Like, why would I bother biking to work if I can't be the best cyclist in the world, if I can't make, you know, get there faster than any human has ever... And it's like, no, I mean, just saying it just sounds so absurd, but think of how many people, probably people listening right now, have thought like, oh, I don't know, I'm not really that great of an artist, so I should probably give this whole thing up and move on to something else. And I will say, like, probably a big part of Raza choosing to paint the way he did and having some of his imperfections makes me think of... It's another way to rebel against the dominant, what was known as the Bengal school of art, this British royal, or not British, colonial style of painting that he would have learned when he was in school. And so it's another way of just rejecting that completely outright and be like, oh, you want me to make perfect paintings, hey? Yeah, I'm not going to do that. Actually, I'm going to deliberately go out of my way to allow some looseness in my paint technique. And all his teachers would just be like, you know, their brains would be exploding. And yet it's the very thing that made him famous and beloved to hundreds of millions of people around the world. Right? That's really important to remember. Okay, so I'm painting this outside edge. I'm going back to this warm red kind of out of the tube, so it's a little bit closer to one of these up here, and it contrasts a bit to what we have in here. Now I'm not exactly sure if I want to keep it like this warm red, or maybe I'm going to paint over it later and maybe make it a little bit darker. I don't know. And I don't need to know just yet, do I? Right? I can see how the painting is unfolding and then just change my mind later on or keep it. I mean, I could, you know, depending on how the painting goes, I could decide to do all sorts of wild things at some point in here and invert the colors. I could, you know, add glitter and gold paint and silver paint, pearlescent colors. I got pearlescent medium I can add into paint. I do think maybe it should be darker, but I'm not going to fixate on that until I'm further down the line here, because once I get all the other colors in there, I might be like, whoa, I'm so glad I left that red like that. Like, whoa, that was, imagine if I put a darker red there. Whoa, that would have been awful, right? I don't know. I have no idea until we get a little further down the road. So I'm putting in this darker red here. Right, and I'm deliberately trying to add some nuance in it. And one of the ways that I'm doing that is allowing my hand to kind of rub against the table and kind of, it makes it kind of, you know, stick a bit. You know, something that I would go out of my way to avoid generally. And now I'm using that very same thing that is usually an issue, and I'm using it to help me get the effect I want. Right? That's like, for every artist who encounters a situation where they're like, oh, this is awful, like somebody else sees that as an opportunity and goes, huh, that's interesting, I find it really hard to do a straight line. Well, rather than get obsessed with doing perfectly straight lines, what if I lean into this and make my lines deliberately wobbly and uneven? Cool. I like the way this is turning out. I'm really, really happy. Okay. Also, I think I'm going to take this warm red and I'm going to put this right in here. This is warm red right out of the tube. So I don't know how I somehow just seem to kind of miss this earlier. And of course, just put my hand down on the wet paint. Uh, I think that might be okay for now. Okay. Now, is that all the red in this painting? I think at least for right now it is. So let's just take a zoom back out. Okay. I like that a lot. I mean, even to the, well, I'm still going to paint this. I think I'll paint this about maybe a cool yellow, and we'll see how that turns out. Okay. I mean, the way that this painting looks like on camera, I don't know what it looks like on your guys' thing, but on your side, but I really like, I mean, there's part of me that is like, I don't know, I could almost leave the painting like this. I like these yellows and oranges and reds. Obviously it's still missing a lot of all the blues and the dark blues in here, but it's also interesting to me that how many people are watching right now. That's great. I mean, that makes me really happy. Like, I definitely, there's a lot of other artists that we could be studying from that are far more well known, at least in the Western world, than Saeed Haider Raza, but so it makes me really excited that there's so many people tuning in and watching the creation of this painting. Obviously, people in India, Raza is very well known and celebrated as one of the great, the progressive artist group in India would be equivalent to the group of seven in Canada, or the pop artists or abstract expressionists in the United States, or the young British artists, the YBA artists in England, etc. Right? Like, every culture seems to have a contemporary group of artists that are dominant and very well known, that little kids in schools and grandmas have heard about before. I ordered a new light that comes in the mail tomorrow, and I'm just gonna see if I can get this light to brighten up. One moment. Okay, that makes a difference. I was like, things are just starting to get a little dark. Like John had said earlier, it reminded him of a sunset. It's like, I feel like I'm living in a sunset right now. So I just made an adjustment there because I was noticing on camera I was getting this weird bright reflection. Sometimes it looks like there's white or other colors in there where it's just the light reflecting off certain things, and then it creates weird shadows, and that can be helpful to see, because often you're really happy with the way the painting looks, and then you put it up on the wall and then it's getting all these weird shadows and highlights because of texture. Okay, so let's move into the blues. So these colors here. So this is absolutely 100% a warm blue, right? This is your ultramarine blue right out of the tube. Maybe a couple coats of it there. Same thing down here. So let's just do that. And then, so here's my warm blue, ultramarine blue. I don't want to get too much of that yellow on there, so let's just... The one thing I find with specifically the ultramarine blue is it's very transparent. It's not a particularly opaque color, so you're often having to paint it a couple of times, which is kind of what it looks like he did here, in that the painting looks like he painted these blues several times. Slightly misshapen. I don't mind it though. Now this here, I think these are cobalt blue, which is kind of like in between warm and cool blue. So let's take some of this cool blue to start without washing my brush. Let's go take this cool blue, my cerulean blue. I think I'm going to just use this cerulean blue here without mixing without really mixing the warm blue in. That way I've got three other ways that I can modify blues. Keep not quite getting the curve here that I want. You can see I just sort of brushing it away with my fingers, so it looks a little bit sloppy, but I'm not too concerned with that. So I wonder how many people are painting along with me on this painting right today. Because I know lots of the times people just tune in and they're listening, but while they're working on their own things, which is great too. I love that. I love that people feel like, oh, this is kind of like their painting time, and they're gonna tune in and sort of kind of hang out with me like an open studio, and maybe hoping I'll drop a little bit of wisdom, that I have within me. Okay. So the color right below this looks to me like a little bit of a gray. It actually looks like he painted the same color twice, or maybe even there was a yellow in there, because maybe we could see a bit of yellow. So to get that color, the way that I would do that is take my cool blue and take a bit of warm red and add this in here, and we'll get a bit of a gray. This is how you get your darkest color, but we're not going to make it fully dark. We're just going to want something a little bit different. And now we get this in one layer, and he used 2 layers to do this. And I'm not saying that like I'm better than he is because I can mix this color in 1 layer. I have the benefit of seeing the finished painting that he worked on, right? I get to see the final stage, and then I'm trying to recreate the final stage of this painting. That's not usually how a painting works, right? Most of the time, artists might have an idea of what they want to do, but the painting is evolving as they paint on it. They change their minds, and so he would have mixed this color. The color that we see there is the result of several layers of paint that are combining to create this color. It's so hard to, like, I kind of want to go in and fix everything and touch things up, and it's like, you know what, that's not the painting we're making today, Michael. You gotta like let's have a bit of, show some restraint. So okay, let's do that. Let's just ease off, and like I want to kind of touch it up, but let's just let's move forward here. So I'm taking the same color I had down here. I'm coming up to paint this area. There might be a little bit too much of a gap between these colors. So let's kind of zoom in. So I'm going to come back and kind of close this gap a little bit. Looks pretty good. Okay. So, I think I might use this same color, although I think it maybe just less. So the color I was just using was my cool blue with just a bit of warm red in it, right? And that gave me a bit more of a grayish quality. I think I'm going to keep, I like that, but I want more warm blue back in here. There's a bit of this foundational yellow. Because I think I don't want to be quite so gray. So let's take this color. Like, as I'm painting this, I think to myself, this is a bit, it's like a game of how much imperfection can I live with? Like, it's sort of like, how anal retentive am I? Like, can I let certain things here go, or am I going to need to touch it up? And then I've got Oops. All these blues are like quickly, radically changing the whole color. I mean, obviously, but they're changing this picture a lot. Like, so the painting, remember there was a stage probably about around the hour mark where I was like, I kind of like this painting as it is. Maybe I could, I mean, I wasn't going to stop, but I could see why someone might want to stop. I could see why some people would be pretty happy with just the yellows and the reds in this painting, and even allowing all those big unfinished areas of the painting to stand. Like, so for instance, let's zoom back out. And like I will say, at this stage, I'm not so happy with the way everything looks right now. Like, if I had to stop and leave this painting like this, I'd be like, oh, well, that's kind of a bummer. Which is a good reminder of the fact that no matter if you're painting by a master like Raza or anyone else, or you're working on your own painting, that those feelings of frustration or not, even if things aren't going bad, but they're just not turning out the way you want, you just have to remember you're only seeing you're seeing an unfinished canvas right now. And you have to see it through to the very end before you make any judgments. Right? And a lot of beginner artists don't quite understand that whole that part of the painting process, and will give up, you know, around this time. They're like, it's still not working out. It's just, you know, it's sort of like the same kind of thing. People who go to a hockey game or baseball game and their team is losing, you know, around the midway point, and be like, well, let's head home before, let's get ahead of that traffic. And you're like, well, but yeah, but the game, there's still an hour or half an hour left in the game. Like, why would, I mean, they could still come. Nah, it's I'm telling you, it's over. And then you see this, that happens all the time at, because I like going to sporting events, and and then later on the game, that team that looked like they were going to lose ends up winning the game, and you just think about that person sitting in traffic going, I guess I should have waited. Okay. So this looks good. I mean, I think it looks good. I like where it is. You know, once we start putting in more of these blues, because I basically, there's one more blue to put in. Maybe before I clean this brush, I'm gonna do this one more color, because I think everything else is a dark blue from this point forward. I guess here, this is an ultramarine blue. It looks like it's been painted a couple of times, so Again, I see lots of comments in the chat. I'll get to that in a minute. People go like, in a minute. Sometimes you say in a minute, and then that's like an hour later. Well, I am trying to make a painting. So I don't necessarily always get to the comments as quickly as maybe I could. So I just rubbed that away because I felt like, you know what, I think I can. Don't want to be quite so tight here to which will ultimately be a much darker color coming through here in this area, ringing right around. So don't want to crowd it too much. And as I've painted it back, like I've painted almost right up to where I was before, but you know, like a millimeter further away. And that millimeter is not, it is, you know, when we're talking little details, can be a big deal, right? Okay. And then let's do this here. So I'm just going to take my warm blue right out of the tube. I did, you know, there was a little bit of cold blue, I guess, in here. But I'm just going to paint this into this big area. And then I promise I'm going to take a break here and look at all these dozens and dozens of comments. So you could see that his color is darker, but I think that's because we've got two layers of paint here. We've got this color that I'm painting right now, basically my warm blue and ultramarine blue, and then over top of it he's done either just the same color a second time, which would make it much darker. Because remember, it's going to dry darker anyway. So, but if I just do another layer of it, I imagine it's going to go much darker. Or, I mean, not imagine, I know it'll go much darker. So, without even having to modify it, I'll get pretty close to the color that he had. So I'm going to let that dry, and then I'm going to do another layer on it momentarily. Paul says, thanks for saying it doesn't have to be perfect. This is a challenge for me. Low2 says, hi, Michael. I usually watch on the YouTube TV app, so I'm not typically active in the chat, but I'm on mobile tonight. Great. Great to see you, Low2. Our daughter's middle name is Lo, so it's, you got a good name. Sandra says, hi, Michael and friends, tuning in live for the first time, and I'm excited to be here. Hi, Sandra. Great to have you here live with us. Awesome. Paul says, nice to hear from some new artists. Welcome. Lo says, regarding lighting and shadows, I'm wondering what's the best type of lighting to use when viewing art, or if lighting even matters. Wow, great question. Okay. You know, that's a big question. Lighting when it comes to art is, there's lots of different opinions about that, and some artists like painting under fluorescent light. They like fluorescent lights tend to be very white and almost a bit bluish, can be kind of a harsh color, but sometimes people really like that because fluorescence, I mean, and you can get different kinds of fluorescence obviously, but they tend to be like a pretty flat, like neutral kind of a color. Some people will say painting under daylight is the best. If you can be painting outside or next to a window, that's best. But of course the lighting can change throughout the day, and that could mean a color you mix you might have the exact same color on your palette, but over the course of the day it looks different because the light is different, right? And that can be really confusing to some people. There's plenty of artists who paint, or at least painted historically, under candlelight, like Goya, Francisco Goya. If you remember the painting that no one wanted to paint that I did for perversely for Father's Day, Saturn devouring his son, Goya famously had a hat that he had candles on this big kind of sombrero like hat, and he had like dozens of candles in a room. It was all in this room. All the paintings that he made that way are in the Prado Museum in Madrid. I mean, they're called the Black paintings. Awesome. And he made them all under candlelight at night. He didn't want anybody to know he even made them. I don't know if anybody even knew they existed until after he died. And so he loved painting by candlelight. And obviously those paintings look very different under candlelight than they do in daylight or artificial lighting. If I remember, in the Prado, that room is sort of lit with just daylight, right? So the light really changes dramatically while you're standing in the room, which gives it this kind of eerie effect. And all those paintings are pretty, they're both painted kind of dark, but they're dark thematically. A lot about, the kind of both fantastical things from his imagination, but also things that he was seeing, because the French under Napoleon were occupying Spain at the time, and it was a pretty nasty occupation. Personally, I like a little bit more of a slightly cool, little bit bluish color. I mean, that's also because I'm filming everything, so my lighting is a little bit more on the white end of things, as opposed to, because most people in your homes have more of a yellow light, right? Incandescent light bulbs tend to have a bit more of a yellowish quality, versus what I like is a bit more of a daylight, which is a little bit more bluer kind of a light. And you can get different light bulbs like that at your local Home Depot or Canadian Tire or wherever you buy your light bulbs from. A really great question. And often the light that you make your paintings under could be very different than the way that they're exhibited, or when people buy them and bring them into their home. So it is kind of nice. Like, I like looking at my paintings under different lighting conditions. That's why, like, upstairs in our living room, we have a little bit more warmer lights there. And I like taking these paintings right after I finish them, and I go upstairs and I set them on the credenza that my wife got, and have the lights there. And as we get into our daughter's nighttime routine, we start dimming the lights down. And I like, often my wife will just catch me just standing there looking at the paintings as the lights are almost down, because I'm looking at, because the paintings are changing, they're alive, right? They react differently to different light. And sometimes a painting, you're like, I don't know if it turned out well. You just sort of put it away without thinking, and then you look at it under a different light. You're like, oh, whoa, it looks great, right? You know, whoa, that's, and so sometimes it's, maybe the painting is perfect, it's just the lighting is just off on it, right? And I know when I've exhibited my work, you know, half the deal is hanging the paintings, and then the other half is standing around with the gallery staff while people are on ladders moving lights around, and the paintings, like, everything changes really dramatically with different lighting. Just as, like, you know, in the theater, like, good lighting when it comes to film and theater can totally transform, you know, a play, and the audience isn't even really aware of the effect it's having. Great question. Thank you so much, Lil. Gregorio says, hi, everyone. Happy to be here after watching a lot of pre-recorded videos and learning from them. I'm so thrilled to be on a live one. Much love and appreciation for all, especially Michael. Thank you very much. I appreciate you saying that, Giorgio. That's really cool. Yeah, it's great. Lots of people who are tuning in for the first time live, so I'm happy to have you guys here and painting along with me or watching, and obviously gives you an opportunity to ask some questions, so that's great. Cool. Okay. Thanks for all those questions. I'm going to get back into the painting process here. So what do we have left to do? Like, we're not too far away, because really what we're going to be doing next is these areas of very dark color. Now, one might be like, instantly grab your black. I'm like, okay, let's finish this painting off in 5 minutes with the black. Yeah, you could do that. You could use your black and you could be done very quickly. I am going to... I'm gonna hold off on adding any black for right now, and I'm going to mix a really dark color with the existing split primary palette I have here, because I don't, as I talked about, I think there's a few places where he's got black, but I don't even know if it's black on its own. I think it's it's a color mixed with other colors. So I'm going to resist the urge to use black. It's also because I consider this a painting class. I think it's helpful for people to see how we can make a really dark color without touching the black paint, right? So let's take some warm red. Let's maybe do this over here. So I'm taking my warm red right out of the tube. Let's put it right here. And then I'm going to take my cold blue right out of the tube, and I'm going to put it right here. So what happened is, and let's just take a second. If we look at this color wheel, this is something I made a year ago in our Intro to Primary, or Intro to Acrylic painting class, which I'm going to be restarting in January. And this will look a little bit different. I've already got a pretty good idea how I want to do this. But anyway, what we've just done is we took this warm red and we mixed it with the cool blue. And you see we're going right next to this neutral core here. So this color is, you know, basically like a really dark brown as it is. I'm now going to take a bit of cool yellow and add it into this color. And what it does, if you almost imagine this is an elastic band, that cool yellow is going to pull this color even further into the neutral core, so much so that if I add white to it, and I'll show you how I'll do this, if I add white to it, it's going to go gray. And I can mix a perfect gray using these three colors. So let's do that. because I think it's so helpful to see this, because most, like, even when I first did this decades ago, it just seemed like a magic trick. I could not believe it. So this color right now is like a really dark brown, kind of purpley color. Generally not the color you would sort of want. You'd probably look at it like, oh, that's kind of gross. But it can be very useful at times, right? So now I'm going to take this cool yellow. I don't want to put too much in it. And if I mix this in pretty... Actually, let's... So I'll just demonstrate. If I take this color here, start adding some white to it. Look at that. I got a gray. What? Isn't that cool? I just think that's the neatest thing. I love showing that to people for the first time, because I think there's many people will see that and they don't believe it. And if you've been painting with me for a while, you've seen me do that hundreds of times, and it's no big deal. But if you're a beginner artist, seeing gray appear on a canvas where there's not a drop of black is pretty cool. Okay, so let's take this dark color, and I'm going to start painting in these lines. We'll see if we actually want to use any black at all. Like, I could see, the only place I could really see maybe being black is this line down here. This here. Maybe these ones on the top. But this doesn't seem like black. That seems like the color we just made. In fact, let's just take it, start painting it. Let's zoom in. Oops. Sorry, just 1 second here. There we go. Technology always stressing me out. So I'm just gonna focus that again. So this is a little bit, I think I put maybe a little bit too much cool yellow in it, so it's maybe a bit more on the grayish side, even without any white in it. That's okay. I can always just mix it again, or just add a little bit more red and blue, warm red and cold blue into this, to make it just a little bit darker. Because the cool yellow is going to lighten the color up a little bit. Is it outrageously? No, I don't think it's fine. Again, if I really want, I could mix a little bit of actual black into this color, but I think what I'm going to do is just see how far I can get with the paint just like this, and then if I need it, I'll use it. But I want to be able to show some restraint if I can help it. Let's put this. yeah. I was considering maybe painting this, mixing a bit more warm blue into some of these dark colors, which I can always do, but let's get all this color in first. And then we'll make up our minds. Again, it's like it takes a good amount of restraint to avoid just going right to these lines and leaving it a little bit, you know, this kind of wobbly. I'm always putting my hand down right in the middle of the painting and getting paint on my hand. So it's just something to kind of be a little bit mindful of, is if you do that regularly, is kind of just checking the back of your hand and just making sure that you're not gonna stamp that color all over the canvas. And of course, you know, if you've got, you know, sleeves or bracelets and things, you just want to be careful they're not dragging across the cover, or the canvas. I know some people that love painting with. I used to share a studio with an artist, and she had these like all this jewelry, and you could, every time she was painting, you just heard like rattlings of bracelets. And didn't bother me. It was kind of nice. It was because it's like it creates a rhythm, right? There's like especially if people are doing, you know, something where there's a little bit of repetitive motion, it kind of ends up, it sounds like a rattle, or like in a band, tambourine or something. Which is one thing that I really miss about being in class over the past year of teaching, is one of the things that I teach at the university I teach at is figure drawing like nude models, or they're not always nude. Often I get them to dress up. We have some models here in Vancouver that are super creative and that have like all sorts of wild costumes they bring in, and they love dressing up, and it is so much fun, like, and the students just love it, obviously, too. But apologize for the constant digression, but one of the things I loved is the sounds of people drawing and painting in person. When there's like a room full of like 24 people, and they're all just, everyone's quiet. I often will put music on, but sometimes the music stops, and you just hear just the sounds of like pencils going over the surface of paper. Oh, I love it. I could imagine some people not liking it. I could see some people saying, "Oh, it sounds like, you know, chalk on a chalkboard," and which again, some people love, some people it drives them nuts, but yeah, so this area, I'm gonna go back into this blue. I'm not super happy with this kind of glob of paint there. So I just kind of get my finger right in there. Remember, I said if I want, I could always paint a little bit of white and then add that foundational color I put down first, and then boom, problem solved and problem gone kind of thing, right? I don't know if I'm going to do that, but I always have that option. That's one of the great strengths of acrylic painting, is you're never really out of luck. You can always paint over whatever you've got, let it dry, just add some white, cover it up, let it dry, start it over again. Boom, problem solved. And it's just which you can do with other paints to some extent. You can do that with oil paint, but oil paint takes, you know, can take a week to dry fully or more. There's some oil paints that literally take decades to dry. I'm not kidding you. You can look it up. There's some paintings that were made hundreds of years ago that are still considered to be, you know, in the process of drying. But yeah, what was I gonna say here? So let's get this color right down here, which is that color. Now that looks to my eyes to be just ultramarine blue, but I think there's what we can do is take, and it's a little bit more ultramarine blue in my palette here. I think it's ultramarine blue. We could paint a couple of layers of this, but just for the sake of time, I'm going to take some of my, I'm going to take this gray, or the dark color that I've just been using, and I'm just going to mix it in to my ultramarine, my warm blue. And if I feel like I'm not super happy with this, what I would do is just let it dry, and then paint ultramarine blue right over top of it. And I think that would probably get the color you want. A little bit, because the ultramarine blue, what's so special about ultramarine, at least in its original state, as its pure pigment, it has this kind of glowing, it kind of glows even when it's really dark. It has this weird blue radiating energy from it. So if this is not quite what you want, let it dry and then paint it, use it again and paint right over top of it. I am just going to take this color I just used and I'm just going to paint it in this area down below. Just again for speed's sake. And you see we get pretty close to the original, right? And maybe I'm just going to take this again. And I'm just going to take a little bit more warm blue. Paint right over there. And now we get this nice ultramarine blue. Beautiful. Okay. We're getting there towards the end here, folks, because really, what is it what's left to do? I guess these, this outside edge and then these lines in here, right? I actually really like the way that this color turned out. As I just, okay, okay, let's just wipe that away. Blop of a color that I didn't mean to put there. I was trying to say I really like the way this turned out, and then I just put a big blob of paint in it. Okay, I don't think you can see it on camera, but anyway, what I was about to say is I like this color that I was just using, which is this dark gray with ultramarine blue in it, and I'm going to use that around this outer edge. Like you can see, like look how high I'm holding this paintbrush. Right? I'm not doing this, which is how most people paint. right? You should try it. Like, if anything, just try it. You could do it in an area where there's big areas of paint, and you don't have to worry about making a mistake. But it can be a little terrifying, because obviously if you're painting further away, you're going to have a little bit less control. But specifically for what we're doing right here, it actually works really well of adding a little bit of that kind of variation that we want to recreate Raza's technique. Henri Matisse famously used this technique. This is why you see paintbrushes that are really long. Like, sometimes people are like, well, why are paintbrushes longer than a pencil? Like, why would anybody want a really long paintbrush? It's because often an artist wants to, especially if you're working on a really large canvas, you want to be able to stand back as far away as possible so you can see how those lines are interacting with everything else around them. You know, when we're making a small canvas like we're making right now, having a big long paintbrush might seem a little bit bizarre, but that's why I'm holding it so far up anyway. Right, like that line on the edge kind of all changes this whole painting instantly, doesn't it? Like, it's kind of remarkable how a line that is literally on the edge of the painting, on the outside of the edge of the painting, is affecting the way I see things inside the center of the painting. Right? It's that's the magic of the edge. I remember, again, all this kind of stuff just seems pretty geeky, I think, to many people, but I remember when I was in art college, like, we would I remember going out for drinks with friends who were also painters and arguing about edges. In the same way that, like, you know, I imagine hockey players arguing about how they tape their sticks, or tennis players about how the tension on the strings on their rackets, or writers and how sharp the pencil, or the brand of pen, or the software they use to write on. And but once you get sucked into it, into any kind of a craft, all those little details start becoming more and more important. So I think we're probably about 20 minutes from being done. Like, I think I want to put, maybe yeah, let's do this. I'm going to do this next line here. And then we got a cool yellow. That might be really the only place where we got cool yellow in this painting. And then we'll be done, I think. Knock on wood. I feel like if anybody was going to invent a drinking game based around these paintings processes, it would be about, like, anytime I start talking about being done or wrapping up, is like, I don't know, a couple of finish your drink. Because you're just like, oh no, he's talking about being almost done. That's clear indication that we've got another 2 hours of painting on. as I often, when I get, because I mean, part of it's silly, but you know, it's also my favorite part of making a painting is like the beginning and the end. I mean, I do really enjoy the middle, but again, if I was to choose, the end for me it's like the end game of a chess or of a great novel. Like, you don't want to put it down. You're like, oh, I'm in it. Oh, I just want to keep on going. Okay, I've still got 2 pages left. Okay, I'm gonna go make it a little bit of tea, and I'm gonna do some laundry because, I don't want to get to the end. And if I finish this novel, what am I gonna do? It's been a part of my life for the past couple of weeks. Like, so part of me just really likes the end of the painting because it's sort of like there's some parts of it can be really exciting, and it also feels like it's kind of the end of something. I mean, literally the end of something, and I just want to keep on living in that world, right? Okay. Again, wow, it's changing painting again in a great way. It's the same thing like the other day we painted the Talarator painting of the 2 palm trees tied together. The Bind That Ties was her work. I love that painting. I think it turned out really great. And you know, I did spend probably half the time that I would paint that it took to make that painting on the border around the outside edge, which is critically important for that painting. And it totally just elevated that painting from being a pretty good painting to being really, really cool. As any kind of border or frame tends to do. Because what it does is it separates it from the world around it. And, you know, I mean kind of like your wall or fireplace or studio or bathroom wall or kitchen or the tiles, stucco, wood, drywall, whatever, wallpaper, whatever it is, it separates it from that, right? And it sort of tells us, okay, this is something kind of unique and important because it needs like a palate cleanser for us to appreciate it, right? And that it just has like a cue to the human brain that just says like, ooh, this is special, this is important, this requires a little bit of veneration. So who's painting this painting with me today? Is there anybody who's actually making this Raza painting with me? Or is everybody working on their own things? Whatever it is that you're working on, I would love to see it on the Facebook page. You know, I have been talking about doing the feedback session this weekend. I just heard my father-in-law come through the the door upstairs, and I'm just thinking, maybe this weekend is not a good idea to try to, when someone's flown all the way across the country to spend time with our family. So I think I might bump it to next weekend. I'll have to see how I can fit it in, because next week's also a very busy week because we're starting Picasso week, and we got a lot. We're going to be painting almost every day next week, or at least I will be. I don't know what you're going to be up to. So I'm just worried how that's going to fit into the scheme of things, because it is really important to me. I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things about doing these episodes, so I don't want to forget about it or overlook. So I think we'll do that. Cool yellow there. Let's clean these brushes off. So my question to myself is just really at this point, because we're almost done, is do I actually want to add any black into things, or is it okay just like the way it is right now? And I don't quite know just yet. I think it's also possible that this cool yellow that I'm about to add here could alter things a little bit. Now I'm just painting cool yellow right out of the tube. I think it's okay. I was a little bit worried it might be too bright. If you felt like it was a little bit too intense, I would just mix a bit of warm yellow in here. But I think it's okay. Okay, I feel like I want to shape that a little bit better, so I'm just going to take some of my warm yellow and a little bit of warm red. That cool yellow is a little, it's a little out of place, but is it too out of place? I don't know. I think it's okay. I am looking now at this warm yellow and feeling it might be a little bit too bright. Like, I think I'm gonna add a bit of more warm red in here. That feels better. It feels like I needed, because often your frame is either really dark, like a black or brown, or white. I often have my artwork framed with white frames. I just really like them. So I feel like this needed to either get a little bit darker or brighter. So I went back to the original, the painting by Raza, and was like, I think it needs to be just a bit darker. I think that helps. I mean, obviously my edges are a bit wider than his. In fact, I'm a little bit off center, aren't I? This side's got a little bit more than this side, but yeah, whatever, right? I think that's also because I left a, rather than going up to the line here, I went, there's a gap there, whereas here I went right up to the line. Small difference, but it all starts to add up, hey? I think I'm going to take this same color that I just mixed. It's a little bit of a darker orange. And so again, this is, you know, this is the part of the painting that I enjoy the most, is when I'm just in here doing some fiddling. Might have been a bit too much, eh? Huh? So the question is that too much, and does this have to get a little bit darker? Or is that okay? I don't know. I don't know. I think I might be done. You can let me know what you think, or how yours is turning out. I mean, one of the differences that I see between mine and his, especially down here, is he's much closer to the lines here. So I think I'm just gonna like the colors. I mean, have very little gaps, so I'm just gonna tighten those up where possible. again, it's like it is tough to leave any gap, let alone a small gap here. I think that's good enough, right? Although that cool yellow might just be too strange on its own. I think I'd just, yeah. Let's just take this cool yellow. It's going to take some warm yellow and mix it in. It's still going to be pretty bright. Maybe not quite. Very subtle. I'm going to take that a little bit more warm yellow. I think I need to bring this line down a little bit. It's because, like, this one line just felt a little bit too wide. That feels better. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Panchtatwa. And I don't know the date, so I'm just going to leave it like that. I think it's early 1980s is my guess. Some of these more abstract paintings that we do tend to be some of my favorites, so we'll see how this one ages around our house and how long it's, because I usually have about 10 of them upstairs in our living room at any one time, which drives my wife crazy because it kind of totally changes the organization of her very carefully organized living arrangement. That's life living with an artist, right? It's just constantly throwing chaos around. Okay. So, I'm happy with the way that turned out. If you liked today's episode, please like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. There's lots of new people who joined for the first time live. I'm glad to see that. I know on Saturday we're going to be doing another painting. I don't know if we're going to end up doing our feedback session. I have to just think about it and how I can make that work. If you want to leave a donation, there's the PayPal link down below. I certainly appreciate your continued contributions. It helps keep the show running. It helps buy a new light that I'm going to have to get arriving tomorrow. Yeah, or if you want to send a check or e-transfer, contact me through the Facebook group, or you can use my email, which is on my website, again, linked below. Wow. Oh, you know what we didn't talk about? Let's just, I forgot I wanted to share a little bit about, is it linked in here? The Bindu. The Bindu is the dot, and the dot is a very important part of Hindu culture, and it's something that obviously Raza incorporated into many of his works. Have a dot. I don't know if she shows. Okay, yeah, here's the story. Let me just bring this up. I know I was about to say goodbye, and then here I am dragging it on a little bit longer, but so he used this, the Bindu in Hindu culture is sort of like the center of the universe, from which everything grows or comes from. And when he was elementary school, a teacher made a dot on the blackboard and asked him to focus on it, to concentrate on it, and from that moment it made this big impression on him and his inability to focus, that he started really using the dot, or these circles, large circles, small circles, in his work as like this focus area, and also again representing the source of which everything comes from. He says here, my work is my own inner experience and involvement with the mysteries of nature and form, which is expressed in color, lines, space, and light. I mean, I love that. My work is my own inner experience, which, is not that way for everyone. Sometimes people don't want to paint anything that has anything to do with what's inside. It's just like, I want to paint, pretty landscapes, pretty people, pretty animals, which is totally fine. But for him, his work was all about what's going on inside, and also engaging with the mysteries of nature. Whoa, that big stuff, big things, and yet the work on its own, at the end of the day, seems fairly straightforward and simple, right? And that's okay, because for him, if it's meaningful, that's enough, right? Okay, everyone. My light dimming here slowly is probably a good indication that it's time to say goodnight. Thank you, everyone, for joining me once again. We'll see you in a couple of days. Until then, enjoy your evening or morning, afternoon, wherever you happen to be on this wonderful planet. We'll see you again very soon. Yeah, good night, everybody.